The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. ASU offers the only online undergraduate digital media literacy degree, teaching students how to recognize and combat inaccuracies on all platforms. They are using cutting-edge tools and tactics to separate fact from fiction in a digital world overloaded with misinformation. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalohungva. The trade show at the National Indian Gaming Association's conference is hosting more than 6,000 people this week. Aaliyah Chavez spoke to vendors and tribal leaders about what they are looking for and buying.
1, 2, 3.
The doors officially opened Wednesday for Indian Country's largest gaming trade show. The expo in Las Vegas is a place for exhibitors to meet casino owners. There are vendors here for everything from bingo and slot machines to playing cards and poker. Tribal leaders like Jordan Dresser say the expo provides the perfect atmosphere for finding new products and staying in touch with what's new.
We're looking for ways to upgrade, to change things up, and just to kind of get a pulse of what's going on in the industry.
Other tribal leaders say the show is important to attend because gaming brings in large revenue and jobs to their citizens.
It is. We're a small rural county up in Northern California, and we're the 4th or 5th largest employer.
Stacy Carmen says aside from the products, she learned a lot here about how to keep people safe in her casino.
I know that I really enjoyed, we both did the MMIW session that they had, which is a little different from gaming, but the speaker did such an excellent job of telling us how it really is part of gaming and how we can get trained and learn how to identify young girls that are being trafficked. And so for me, that was just really an awesome takeaway from yesterday.
There are more than 300 booths, and the spaces take up 3 large ballrooms. The trade show will be open for a total of 2 days. In Las Vegas, Aaliyah Chavez, Indian Country Today.
A New York tribe is one step closer to receiving some of its land back. The Peconic Land Trust purchased more than 4 acres of the Sugarloaf Hill area that is sacred to the Shinnecock tribe because it's an ancestral burial ground. The $5.6 million purchase was funded by donations and private money. Even rock star Roger Waters helped fund another part of the project. The Land Trust will work with the Graves Protection Warrior Society to restore the land. That includes removing existing structures and restoring the land to its natural state. That process is expected to take a year. Once that happens, the Peconic Land Trust will work with the town board to transfer the title of the land to the Shinnecock tribe. This transfer of land is seen by tribal and city officials as a bridge between them and a promise for a new beginning for them. While the Tokyo Olympics will kick off this Friday, another Olympics is underway in Alaska. The World Eskimo Indian Olympics held its opening ceremony in Fairbanks last night. The grand entry included participants in games like the knuckle hop, the 1-foot high kick, and the ear weight. These games have been going on for more than 60 years, and the games are rooted in culture. And before the games started, the lighting of the seal oil lamp took place. Then the first round of the blanket toss began. In the past, up to 30 hunters would toss one person high into the air to look for a herd of caribou. Today, the person being tossed is judged on balance and how they land on their feet. Women competed in the fish cutting contest to see who is the fastest to cut and prep a fish to hang in the smokehouse. Many use an ulu, a rounded knife that's ergonomically designed for easy use to fillet a fish. It's used by Yupik and other Eskimos. The finals take place later this week, and the games will conclude on Saturday. In Peru, Pedro Castillo has won a long, intense presidential election battle. The win comes after the country's longest electoral count in 40 years. Castillo has an indigenous background and is a teacher, a retired teacher. Reuters reports he now needs to heal the wounds of a divided nation. The split is between support for his socialist reforms and fears he will upend the Andean nation's traditional politics and mining. Castillo's rise has shaken Peru's political and business elite. He has pledged to redraft the constitution and take a far larger portion of mining profits from companies in the world's #2 copper producer. Castillo won huge support from poor and rural and indigenous Peruvians fed up with the political status quo amid rising poverty and inequality.
Invoco a la lideresa de Fuerza Popular, a la señora Fujimori.
I call the leader of Popular Force, Ms. Keiko Fujimori, to stop putting barriers for this voyage and stop putting obstacles for this country to go forward. Welcome this space to make a government of all Peruvians, a government of all blood.
Historians say Castillo is the first person from Peru's rural poor class to become the president, and he's expected to take office on July 28th. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Thalongva. Up next, it's been an emotional time for the Rosebud Sioux Tribe as they give a proper burial for 9 children who died at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. We'll talk to the president of the tribe when we come back. After more than 100 years, the remains of 9 children are home with their Rosebud Sioux families. They were forcibly taken from their families to attend the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania in the late 1800s. Many died of disease at the school and were buried there. But last week, they were brought home with prayer and ceremony. Joining us today is the president of the Rosebud Sioux Tribe, Rodney Bordeaux. Welcome, President Bordeaux.
Good morning.
And also joining us is Council Member Russell Eaglebear. Welcome, Councilman Eaglebear.
Oh.
President Bordeaux, let's start with you. Tell us what this means to the tribe in terms of healing from this painful history, the returning of these children, and then the reburial in the proper Sioux way.
To me personally, it seemed like these young children back then were basically taken against their will, taken against their family's will, because we were just after the Battle of Little Bighorn, we were put on the reservations where we're currently located, and they basically you look at the reservation system back then, and we always talk about it being a concentration camp, a prisoner of war camp, and when the children were taken, it was against their will. And basically the families had no choice but to let that happen. And so these children went there and they were basically forced to or subjugate to what against their will. And they were stripped of their basically identity, prevented from speaking their language. And they didn't want to be there. And for them to die over there, lands, thousands of miles away, and to be placed in the cemetery over there. And the families all this time always wanted them back. So I think it's really good that our youth recognize that, and they got us going in the repatriation and return of those our students there. So it's good. It's a very historical time. It's a historic history in the making. So we're doing it in a large scale, and we're not done yet. So it's very timely that this happened, and hopefully that knowing that all these children in these boarding schools were basically held against their will, especially early on, and to bring them back to the homelands where they belong and bury them on our homelands is very important. So it was historical.
So, Councilmember Eaglebear, this must have been a long and painful journey to return the remains of these children. Tell us about the youth who helped make this happen.
Okay, back about 5 years ago, when President Obama asked for all the youth to come to Washington, D.C., our youth made a trip there. And on their way back, they stopped at Carlisle and they saw the condition and how our children were buried there. And so they came back and they approached the tribal council and asking us to help them return these kids back home to their homeland. And so that started that process. So what our tribe did was we did a government to government consultation with the United States Army and the national cemeteries, and we started that process of trying to recover our children there. But it's been a long process. Like I said, it's 5 years. And because of the COVID too, last year, we were scheduled to go after them last year, but because of COVID, we had to wait until this year. And so it's been a long process for us here. And our youth, our young adults now, those ones that made that original trip. However, you know, they have a saying, you know, they brought our children home to sleep, but it woke up a nation. I mean, to me, you know, that really means a lot to us, because now throughout this country, throughout Canada, they're finding all these burials. And so it's going to be a long process for us. And I'm glad that the BIA is finally waking up to their trust responsibility and helping us and working with us.
That is so powerful to hear that message of they brought the children home to sleep, but they woke up a nation. And speak to that, President Bordeaux, because while we grieve for the children who died at these boarding schools, so many more went on to become tribal leaders and outstanding people in their areas of work. Talk about the resiliency of these children, the integrity they had to continue to speak their languages, even though they were being punished for that strength and resiliency. Talk about that.
Well, you go back to the families and where they came from. I think it's very important to recognize that the support from the families and the dedication of these young students that just wanted to make it. And there's a drive that is embedded in all of us, and some of them don't bring that out, but it's always in every one of us as Lakota or whatever indigenous peoples we are. And to bring that spirit out and to go as far as you can with that. And you see that happening a lot, even in dire situations such as what happened at Carlisle or any other boarding school. That resiliency is always within us. It just has to be woken up, as has been said before, and it is happening, and it's still continuing to this day. But now, what Mr. Eaglebear said about waking up a nation, it's going to bring out a stronger response, a more prideful response to continue what has begun, and it's just going to be great at restoring who we are, and it's going to make us stronger as a nation.
And President Bordeaux, what hope do you have for Secretary Holland's call for an investigation into U.S. boarding schools?
I have a lot of high hope for her and the commission. You know, I think they have till next April of 2022. There has to be a lot of research done, but I've already reached out to some of the schools in the area that had boarding schools, and reached out to the two different churches that were on our reservation, and told them to get ready because we're going to be coming asking questions. And the BIA already has their marching orders, and it's very important that they adhere to this. We know we're going to run across some bureaucratic roadblocks, but we've always run across those before. But we're going to knock those roadblocks down. We're going to get to the bottom of this and get these questions answered and find these children wherever they are.
Well, thank you. And Council Member Eaglebear, again, talk about the healing aspect of this. How is this helping your tribe heal?
Well, I can see it just through evidence of what took place receiving these children home. And you know, if they were alive, they would have been great grandparents. But you know, now I see a movement among our youth to really take up a cause and finding our relatives. You know, we have here in the state of South Dakota, we still have issues with Canton, which was an insane asylum, and they were putting people there because they didn't want to speak English, you know, and so those stories are out there, and that's going to be our next move and push to to bring those relatives home here back to Rosebud.
All right. Well, I want to thank both of you for joining us. Chairman Rodney Bordeaux, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
And also Councilmember Eaglebear, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having us.
All right, and we'll continue to follow the story as well. And when we come back, Mark Trahant has an update on the vaccines for the coronavirus.
I'm Mark Trahant, Indian Country Today. We're in Las Vegas at the National Indian Gaming Association. And the great thing about this conference is you can see all kinds of people and greet old friends. One of them today is Abigail Echo Hawk. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
There's so much confusion about vaccines. Maybe start with kind of the big picture take on it.
Yeah, right now vaccines, are one way to ensure the health and well-being of our people moving forward around COVID-19. We have to understand that last week in this country, it seems incredible that last week we had more cases in July of 2021 than we did in July of 2020 in the first surge of the pandemic. So it's really concerning to folks to think about that. But the one thing we know about that is 90% of the new cases are completely unvaccinated people. So we need to get our community vaccinated, but we also have to understand what those vaccinations mean, what the science is around them moving forward, and how we as tribal communities, both urban and rural, are going to make sure those vaccines get to our people and they get the right information.
Well, in fact, your research really was the first, I think, to raise the issue that one of the reasons why Indian Country took to the vaccine immediately is because we care about others. It's not about protecting ourselves, but it's about our community. Maybe talk about how your research started on that and where it's led.
Yeah, we did the very first survey in Indian Country looking at what are the beliefs, perceptions, and attitudes of Native people. And we found that 74% of Native people said they'd get vaccinated because they wanted to make sure that our people were safe, our elders, our tribal members. And they were doing it not as an individual decision, but one that was beneficial to the community. That's public health. And we've seen that happen. The Indian Country right now, American Indians and Alaska Natives have some of the highest rates of vaccination of any racial or ethnic group in the country, but it's also regional. We have to understand that there are some tribal communities that have a lot of hesitation, and there are some tribes with vaccination rates of only 35%, while others have more than 90%. So there's also variability within that. And so we really need to concentrate on getting good information to tribal people who have hesitations. So we're about to launch another survey that is going to be working with and understanding people who are hesitant so we can get them good information to make a good choice for their communities.
There are so many things that we learn from any illness, but especially a pandemic. And one of them is that we need to rethink vaccination rates for everything because we have pretty low vaccination rates for influenza, for example.
It's been one of our biggest struggles within Indian Country is getting these vaccinations. I know that our people don't always understand why they're needed, but they are absolutely essential. And there's also just some mistrust about whether or not those vaccines are good for our people. And that happened with COVID-19. One of the things our survey found is that Native people, those that were hesitant, thought maybe we were being tested on as guinea pigs. And so I want them to know there are Native people like myself and others who are deeply involved, who are working with the Indian Health Service, who are working with partners to ensure that us as Native people are included in the research. I was just talking to a friend of mine who recently enrolled his 2 daughters in a clinical trial of testing a vaccine for ages 2 to 11. So we're engaged in the science. We are part of it, and these vaccines are being created for Native people, and we're part of ensuring that they're going to benefit our communities.
We talk about representation all the time, but in clinical trials, representation is life or death.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, because of the hesitation that exists within our communities, I want to say that hesitation has really good reasons behind it. The federal government has not always done good by us. Research hasn't always done good by us, but we are holding them accountable. There's tribal leadership, there are Indigenous researchers like myself who are pushing to ensure that we are included.
We do remember the dark history and how the federal government was not helpful. But the other side of that coin is there are times when vaccines have already saved Indian Country.
Absolutely. I mean, we just have to look at the flu. Vaccine saves lives every single year. And with that comes, we have to get them every year. So one of the conversations that's coming around right now is, for those of us who've been vaccinated, I think I was the second person vaccinated in Washington State, that there are conversations happening nationally now about what happens after these vaccines for people who've been fully vaccinated. Are we going to have to get a booster? What is a booster? People are probably hearing about it maybe for the very first time. When you think about that, sometimes your immune systems with a vaccine, the antibodies, you need to kind of boost them up again. That's why we call it a booster. And for some of these vaccines, that is where the science is pointing us, is that there may be a possibility of a third and maybe even yearly COVID boosters. We don't know yet, but it's really looking like that might happen. And the CDC and the FDA are closely monitoring that, along with our tribal organizations, to make sure that when these things happen, Indian country knows about it, and we have to get prepared.
Well, the amazing thing is so few people actually put numbers to the risk. And the riskiest thing we do every day is make a left turn. And yet with J&J, I think is a great example of that, because the risk of the complications was far less than the risk of getting COVID.
Absolutely, and it was far less than the risk of hospitalization and dying from COVID. And what we were able to discover in the J&J complications, is it was such a small group of people that physicians could closely monitor and identify people who may be at risk with that particular vaccine, and instead offer them another one. So that's what the science does. It allows your doctors to help you make good choices. And in this instance, they were able to get other types of vaccines.
The next step in the booster, what's going to be the messaging with that? And what are the challenges of getting the word out?
Yeah, right now in the last week, there's been a lot going on in the news about the boosters. And that is because Pfizer, which is one of the vaccine companies, put out an announcement where they felt that boosters were going to be necessary for those who had gotten the Pfizer vaccine. However, I want to say there's got to take that with extreme caution. It hasn't been peer reviewed, and that means other scientists haven't looked at it. They haven't gone through the data. And it also wasn't a large enough group of people that they're basing this understanding of to say that that would apply to everybody who got Pfizer. So the FDA and the CDC came together and did something that's pretty rare, and they issued a joint press release that said, right now, we do not feel that we need a booster at this point in time, that we're still gathering the data, we're still monitoring people, and that if it becomes a possibility in the future, it will be done through the CDC and the FDA in a way that every community knows about it. But because this is a possibility, what we as Indian country need to do is to get ready. And what happened with the pandemic was we weren't ready. Even if this is something that doesn't happen, I'd rather we be prepared for this and think about how we get this to our people than to try to scramble at the end and not get it to our people as quickly as it needs to.
I had my first vaccine in January. The idea of having another one in January shouldn't seem that odd.
No, it's pretty normal. And even, I had, when I was born, I got the measles vaccine. My mom got me vaccinated. And when I was 26, I had to get it again. It's not uncommon to have to get boosters at different points in time and on a yearly basis. Again, the flu shot is a really great example. This is normal. It doesn't mean the vaccines didn't work. It means they did work. And we want to keep people's immune responses as high as possible to ensure that if they were infected with COVID, and that rare possibility that they don't end up in the hospital or end up passing on. And we also want to ensure that we're being able to keep our economy open. And with the rising cases of COVID-19 in this country, 90% of those cases in this month were of unvaccinated people. So unless we start getting everybody vaccinated, we're going to continue to see the rise of variants and outbreaks in Indian country and across this nation.
If you take COVID out of the picture, which is hard to do because it's so devastating, many of us have now gone 15 months without a cold, without any other sort of infection. Has this whole episode changed our behavior, or should it change our behavior?
It should absolutely change our behavior. We saw last year, in terms of the rate of flu, an incredible drop nationwide and in Indian country. And that's because people were washing their hands, social distancing, and wearing masks. All of those precautions are public health precautions that allow us to stop the spread of disease. And so we could reduce flu in our community by better hand washing, by continuing to practice good social distancing. And for some folks, they're going to continue to mask, and you should respect that when folks decide that they're going to continue to mask regardless of of them being vaccinated or being around people who are vaccinated. It's a good personal choice for people to make.
Well, and I love the idea of finding metaphors in disease. And I've always liked one of the metaphors that I've never liked is to fight the disease. And one that I love is that we learn from disease. And this is a real example of that, this particular epidemic, because we've learned so much.
Absolutely. I was just here at the NIGA conference, and I shared with the participants is that as somebody who directs a tribal epidemiology center, I feel that I'm engaged in a native tradition. I'm looking to the past of the data of COVID-19 to understand what we need to do in the present, to make decisions for the future and preparing for possibilities like boosters, preparing for making sure that we can get our people vaccinated with good vaccination campaigns. That is a 7 generations look. That's looking to the past for the present to know what our future should look like for the next generations.
That's excellent. And I would add to that, one of the extraordinary things about our history is that we're also data people. I mean, whether you look at buffalo robes or other techniques, we were always collecting data. So thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thanks for having me.
And that does it for this edition of Indian Country Today. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Dalohungva.
Times you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run. This is Indian Country Today.